You fought off hordes of zombies. You battled an army of explosive creepers. But are you prepared for the end? Hey, and welcome back to part 5 of our Minecraft Tower Defense coding tutorial. In today's episode, we're going to install an end portal at the bottom of our level to teleport us to the mysterious end dimension. There, you'll prepare for your final climactic battle with the Ender Dragon and his evil minions, the Endermen. If you just discovered this tutorial series, you should probably go back and start at part 1. You can find the link right up there in the corner. But if you do want to start coding right away, you can load our part 4 catch-up file. It has all the code we completed in the first 4 episodes of this tutorial. You can find a link down below in the description. And now, let the final battle begin! Hey, and welcome back to the Chromeworks studio. I'm Andrew Tomek, your technology teacher, back here with part 5 of our Minecraft Tower Defense coding tutorial. So this week we're going to be wrapping up a whole bunch of stuff. We're going to add a new enemy, the Enderman. We're going to add an end portal, which will teleport us to the final battle with the boss, the Ender Dragon and his minions, the Endermen. And we're going to clean up a few other details. Next week in the final part, part 6, we're going to be adding the Ender Dragon, and he's quite complex, so that'll take a whole episode all by himself, and then we'll actually be good to go with the game. So let's have a look at where we are right up till this point. So I'm looking at the part 4 catch-up file, which has all the code that we completed right up until this point. If you got stuck on something, if you've been following these tutorials and maybe you just added a block in the wrong spot and stuff isn't working properly, rather than combing through every inch of the code looking for which block you did that was different from mine, I would suggest you just start with this file here, and that will get you caught up to where we are so you can keep learning without getting really frustrated. So there's one little bug I wanted to show you in the code. Let's get to it right now. I'm just going to harvest a little bit of gold. So this has been around for a few weeks and I've been ignoring it till now, but I spent some time figuring out what was going on and now we can fix it. So if I click and create some Steve Bowman up here, I'll create 2 of them since I have enough money, get into shooting mode, destroy these guys. Now when I kill the creeper, you'll hear a little hiss sound when it gets damaged, but a few seconds later, another kind of fuse sound and then an explosion that really doesn't belong there. So that's a holdover from an earlier version of the game. You might recall that we copied most of the creeper code over from the zombies. And in this custom block here called die, we have a start sound death. Now there is a death sound for the creeper that we've added here, but we really don't need it. It's a holdover from an earlier version of the game. And this is a sound effect that you're hearing every time that you kill a creeper. It takes a while to run. And it's just messing stuff up. We don't need it anymore because the real explosion sound that we've been talking about happens right next to it here in the when I started the clone command. So when our creeper bashes against a wall, that's the moment he'll explode, and that's when we need that sound effect. Our creepers, when they die and they haven't touched a wall, they're just going to make an ordinary death sound. So I'm going to change this sound in the die block here to just one of the hurt sounds, hurt or hurt 2, and that's going to clear up that bug. Okay, so we're going to work on the Endermen next. The Endermen add a new strategic twist to the game. Let me show you their sprite. So we've just got a walking sprite for these guys, and you can see that they're holding ladders. And we also have a little probe block here that we'll be using the same way we have on the rest of our sprites. So what these Endermen are going to do is, rather than blowing up walls, they're going to build ladders that they and the zombies are going to be able to climb. And that's going to mess up your attempts to hold back the hordes with with walls, right? So it's going to make your walls less effective. And another interesting twist to the game, we were looking at creating spiders earlier, and you might have seen some of our earlier promotional material mentioned spiders, but after playtesting the game, we realized they weren't really adding a much strategic depth to the game, and that's why we went with endermen, who can kind of add an interesting new twist and a new play mechanic to the game. So today I'll be showing you how to build these ladders up, and we'll start with the endermen. Their code is very similar to the creeper here. So if we pull back and look at the creeper code, you'll see that there are 8 different big stacks of code here, and we're going to need to copy all but one of them over to our enderman sprite. And the one we don't want, of course, is the one that's called act as a creeper. Since we don't want our enderman acting as a creeper, we're going to be creating a new block called act as enderman. And that will control the ladder placement and stuff like that. So first of all, let's just copy all the code over. You'll remember that the easiest way to get code from one sprite to another is just to drag it over. So let me show you with the smallest block of code here, just to zoom in and give you a sense of what's happening here. So when you want to copy code from one sprite over to another, the easiest way to do is just to grab the block. And now we're looking at our cursor, not at the block of code. You don't want to be pointing at the enderman like this with the bottom of the code. You want it to be from the spot where you grabbed it at the top of the code. And if you'll notice, if we zoom in here, that when I'm right on top of the enderman sprite, it wiggles a little bit. That's telling us that we're able to copy now and it will land in the right place. And so it doesn't delete the code from here. It simply makes a copy of it over in the enderman. Now the code blocks will always land right in the middle of this area here. They'll all land in exactly the same spot. So we're just going to finish copying all this over and then we'll clean things up again in a second. So just make sure you grab all the blocks except for act of the creeper. So I'm going to grab when I started the clone. I'm going to grab check for damage. I'm going to grab gravity. I'm going to grab the green flag. I'm going to grab die. Actually, we don't need this other one here called when I started the clone that has the creeper explosion sound effect in it as well. We're not going to need that, but we will need the move block here. So when I go over here, you're going to find that these are all stacked up on top of each other, which creates quite a mess. Remember that you can right click and go clean up blocks, and that'll just tidy everything up into a nice vertical row here. It might not be in the right order, but it's close enough for us here. Okay, so there should be 6 blocks inside your enderman now, 6 big chunks of code, and that's what we do in fact have here. Okay, so now that that's working, we do have to change a few things around because these guys don't function exactly the same. Now, in a couple of minutes when we're done the enderman, I'm going to be, and the ladders, I'm going to be adding a new game controller here that's going to control the spawning of the guys. So in all of our sprites here at the very end of the green flag code, we have this code here that's making new ones appear after a certain number of seconds. We're going to be ditching that in a little bit and moving to a totally different spawning system. But for right now, while we're playing with the enderman, I'm just going to change this to maybe spawn every 3 seconds so that we get an enderman right away who we can play around with and play test with. And as I said, that's not going to be sticking around. Now, switch costume. We're going to have to go switch costume back to these costumes inside this creeper for some reason are named Minecraft Zombie. And I'm not quite sure why we did that, but I can't really change it at this point because too many people have earlier versions of the file. So let's switch costume to the main Enderman costume, which is Minecraft Zombie 2. And yeah, so that part is ready to go. So I think our Endermen are now gonna be able to walk onto the screen, and they'll be animating correctly. And I think there's one other spot where the code has to be changed around here. Oh, here we are. So inside the when I start as a clone, the big when I start as a clone, there's a spot here where it turns from a probe back into its default costume. And right here it says Minecraft Creeper. We're going to need to change that to Minecraft Zombie 2 as well. Okay, so the basic setup of our endermen should be set up here, and we'll know if they start spawning on the screen. If we can shoot them with arrows, we'll know that everything's good here. So there's our first enderman walking onto the screen here. They're coming every 3 seconds, so they'll come pretty fast and furious. There we go, and they're dying quite nicely. Now we want our endermen to have more hit points, so we're going to have to change that right under our when I started the clone code here. Right now we're setting hit points to 2, and that's a holdover from our creepers and zombies. So our endermen are going to have 6 hit points. We don't need an explode counter for these guys as well, so I'm going to trash this explode counter, and the rest of this code should be pretty good. All right, so now we're going to add our ladder code here, and that's in 2 different places. We're going to do it in the enderman, and then we're going to go over to this ladder sprite, and we'll finish it up there. So this is all implemented over in our move code. So let's go look at the move block again, if I can find it. So the big red custom block called move. Here it is. And so inside here, you'll see we have a block here called act as a creeper. We don't need that. Let's trash that. And we're going to create a new custom block. So I'm going to go to the My Blocks button, click on the little white button up top here that says make a block. And I'm going to call it act as, whoa, my caps lock is on. Act as an enderman. And then go OK. So that gives us a nice little new red block called act as an enderman, which I can place into the else statement here. And so you'll remember that this area of the code here is where our code is basically checking to see if we're touching a wall. So if we're touching a wall, it moves us up and checks to see if there's a wall block above us. That's going to stop the zombies from moving. So, and it's going to trigger an explosion in the creepers, and that's what the act as creeper block does. The endermen are going to get triggered at this point too. If they find a block that they cannot climb as a zombie would, they're going to start to place ladders. So that's where this act as enderman comes into play. They're going to start building ladders right in front of the wall here. Let's go have a look at the code for act as an enderman. Let me just find it over on my reference screen here. Here we are. It's actually surprisingly short and elegant, this little bit of code here. So the first thing we're going to do is move backwards a little bit. So if we've crashed into this wall and we're finding that we can't climb it, we're going to move backwards a little bit so that we can place the ladder, which is kind of held out in front of us, right? We want everything to be aligned properly. And this act as an enderman is basically all about aligning things properly so that we can let our ladders do their work. So I'm going to go to our motion blocks. I'm going to go move backwards, so -6 steps. And we're not actually going to place the ladder here by creating a clone. We're just going to add to a little database that we set up here. So once again, we're using list variables to keep track of stuff. And the reason for that is we have multiple clones doing multiple things in multiple spaces. And Scratch has a really difficult time keeping track of that. So we're going to basically create a little checklist of all the spots where in this frame of animation we need a ladder to start forming, and we're going to track the location of that and then just start doing them one at a time without having to worry about which clone is doing what. So we're going to add to a list here. I'm going to go down to my list variables, which are the dark brown variables down here. And we should already have a list variable here called ladder. Oh, no, we don't. So let's go ahead and create that ladder QX. So I'm going to go make a list, and I'm going to call it ladder Q. Q is spelled Q-U-E-U-E. It's the weirdest word. All right. and it will still work even if you don't spell it properly, so have no fear, guys. So we're going to add to that list the X location where we want to place the ladder. So I'm going to grab the little block here that says add thing to a list, and I'm going to make sure my list says ladder QX. There we go. And so what we want to add is the position where my enderman is right now, adjusted for the grid. Remember that we're using some fairly interesting math here to make sure that everything is placed according to the 16 by 16 pixel grid that we set up invisibly on the screen. I'm going to hide this ladder QX because we don't really need to be looking at it here right now. So I'm going to add the X position of my enderman, and we're going to divide it by 16, which is, remember, the width of our grid. So X position divide by 16. Now that number, if we're not perfectly aligned to the grid, that number is going to create a remainder. And so we're going to get rid of that remainder by grabbing the absolute value, ABS, which is a complex math function at the bottom of our green operator blocks. And so we're going to round that number down by grabbing the floor, sorry, not the absolute value, the floor of that number. So we're going to round it down, which will force it to align to the grid. But now we're divided by 16, so we have to multiply it by 16 again to get back into the proper number. So now we actually have a coordinate here that is matched up with our grid, and we're going to add that to our list. So that new coordinate that we've come up with is going to be added to a list here, and our ladder queue is going to be looking at that list and placing a new ladder in every spot where this has been added to the list. So even if this is happening in 5 different spots on the screen, they're all going to be kept track of and nobody's going to get confused here. All right, we're done with this procedure here, so we want our enderman to go back to the spot where he was. This is all happening so quickly that you won't actually see the enderman move. Let's go move 6 steps. There we go. And so now that we've placed our now that we've added to our list, we can go ahead and place the ladder. So I'm going to, before I do that though, there's actually one little bit of code that we do have to change here. So I'm going to go back to the red move block here. And you remember I showed you how all this gets triggered if I'm not touching a wall block. But we also need to have this happen if I'm touching a ladder. So this is what's going to stop our ladders from climbing up to the sky, basically. We're going to tell our guy to place ladders as long as there's not a ladder on the block one above us, basically. So, so in addition to this, we're going to do an OR in here. So I'm going to grab an OR block, and I'm going to put this knot on the left side of it, and let's pop it back into the place. So I'm going to say that all of this code is going to get triggered if I'm not touching the wall block, or if I'm touching a ladder. There we go. Okay, so we're ready to move on to the ladder sprite now. And here's where we're going to be looking at our list and placing ladders. There's not too much code in here, so let's get right to it. When I click on the green flag, okay, so here's where we're actually going to create the clone. So we want our reference ladder to be hidden. So let's just go when green flag clicked hide. At the beginning of the game, we want to make sure there's no holdovers from the last game. So we're going to go back to our variables and we're going to delete everything on the list. So I'm going to go delete all of ladder QX. So why is this called ladder QX? It's because we're keeping track of the X position of where the ladder is going to go. The Y position isn't really that important because we're just going to place it on top of the ground or on top of an existing ladder. So the Y position is something we're going to figure out in the code here in a second. So all we care about right now is the X coordinate of the ladder. All right, so now that we've cleared off our list, we're going to start checking forever to see if anything has been added to the list. So we're just constantly going to be going around this loop, checking to see if anything has been added to the list. So we can do that by grabbing a greater than sign and an if statement under our control blocks here. So if length of ladder Q is greater than 0. So let's go grab a darker list block here that says length of. Here we go. So if length of, we'll change that to ladder QX. So if the length of that list is greater than 0, if anything's on that list at all, we're going to go to that X location. We're going to move our reference ladder over there and then create a clone of ourselves. So let's go grab a go to XY. And we're going to, the X coordinate is going to be the item 1 on the list, because we're going to go through this list here and we're going to take the first item and make that the X coordinate of our first ladder. So let's go to X that equals to item 1. So let's go to our list variables again, and we'll go item, there's an object here that's called item 1. So item 1 of ladder QX, which is going to be the X coordinate where the ladder goes. A Y coordinate, we're going to place it up in the air. I'm going to put a 164 here, which lines up with our 16 by 16 grid. You'll see that that divides by 16. And so we're going to start it up in the air, and then we're going to start it moving downwards. But that's going to happen later. First, we want to, now that we're in the right spot, we want to create a clone of ourselves. Create a clone of myself. And then we're going to delete this item from the list. So we're going to go to our variables, to our list variables, and we'll go delete item 1 of our ladder QX. Whoops, sorry. Let's change that. Ladder QX. There we go. Okay, so what's going to happen is the first item is going to be placed and then deleted. If there's more than one item on the list, it's going to come around this loop again and place another ladder, because now the item that was number 2 will be moved up to number 1 position. There will still be a ladder on the list, and so this this block is going to continue running until we run out of ladders to place. Okay, now let's move over to when I started the clone and see what these guys do when they're created. So we'll go to our control blocks, grab a when I started the clone. And we want the ladder to be at the back because we want the mobs that are climbing the ladder to be in front of them all the time. So let's go to our looks commands. We'll grab a go to front layer and change it to back. We're going to show, we don't want our clones to be invisible. And now we're going to do a place ladder on the ground command. So we're going to create a custom block. We're going to click on make a block, and we're going to go place ladder on ground. There we go. Now this one is going to have to run without screen refresh. We want to click on that little button here, and what that is going to do is make sure that everything inside of this code runs over and over and over again without all inside the space of 1 frame of animation. We basically want this guy to start dropping down the screen until it collides with something. And we don't want it to do to just one move. We want it to keep moving until it's basically done. So I've got a new block here called place ladder on ground. I'm going to put it underneath show. And let's work on the place ladder on ground here next. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to change our costume to a probe. Now I've explained this a few times, but I'm going to explain it one more time. Let's go switch costume to probe. So you'll remember that we create a probe because we're checking to see whether our sprite is overlapping with another sprite. Sometimes when we're working with sprites and we try to move them around to see if they're overlapping, we can accidentally collide with an adjacent sprite that we're not trying to collide with. So by making this sprite as small as possible, we can get a much more accurate read on whether we're colliding with an existing ladder or not, without worrying about colliding with the one below us, for example, or the existing one that's already there. So we switch to a probe, and it happens so quickly that you can't even see it. Now let's go repeat until. Now this loop is what's going to be running around forever. It's just going to keep checking and checking and checking and moving us down until we're done. And it's all going to happen within one frame because of the way that we set up this custom block here with the run without screen refresh. Okay, we're going to put an OR statement in here. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be changing our Y inside here. So we'll deal with the OR statement in a second. We're just going to be changing our Y by -16. So every time we run around this loop, our ladder is gonna move down 1 square on our invisible grid here until one of 2 things happen. So what are the 2 things that could happen? So we could be touching an existing ladder. So let's go touching ladder. Now we're not going to find touching ladder here. This is something that we talked about last week as well. And the problem is that Scratch doesn't allow you to touch your own sprite, right? You cannot find the name of your sprite inside a touching block here. We can hack that though by grabbing a touching ladder from a different sprite, and we already added one to our enderman here. So I'm going to go grab this touching ladder, drag it over to my ladder sprite, and that will solve our problem. So repeat until touching ladder or until our ladder is at ground level. So we're going to say check our Y position and make sure it's less than 68. So let's go grab our Y position under our motion blocks. So we're going to move the ladder down until it touches an existing ladder, or until it touches the ground. And what this is going to basically do is the Enderman's going to start placing ladders, and he'll place them as high as he needs to place them until he gets to the top of the existing wall that he's placing the ladder beside, and then he'll stop placing ladders basically because this loop will be over. Okay, so once we're done with this loop, we want to change our ladder back to its original position. We're probing up above ourselves here, and we don't need to do that anymore. So I'm going to go change Y by 16. Or actually, we're probing down below ourselves here, sorry. And now we're going to move back up to where we started from. And we're going to switch our ladder back to our costume back to a ladder again so that it's no longer a probe shape. Okay, so this should be working for the Endermen right now, though not for the zombies. And we'll build a nice wall here for these guys. And you'll see that the first Enderman, again, will build a ladder. There we go. And when he gets to the other side, he'll fall off. Beautiful. Okay, there's a little bit of code to check here. I'm going to let the creeper blast into this wall here. He destroys the wall, but he doesn't destroy the ladder. So we're going to have to fix that. And one other thing that I'm going to need you guys to fix is the zombie code. We need the zombies to climb the ladders as well. And that's just going to require a little bit of a change to the zombies move code, the same change we made for the Enderman, which is we're going to say under the move code here, if not touching wall block or touching ladder. You're going to need to add that to the zombies if you want them to be able to take advantage of the Enderman's ladder. Okay, so to make the ladders vulnerable to explosives, we're going to have to add a little bit of code. Let me get back to my reference object here again. All right, so under our place ladder on ground custom block here, we're just going to have our code checking forever here to see if there's an explosion adjacent to it. So we're going to have it measure its distance from the explosion. And remember how we measured distance in some of the last episodes by taking our X position and subtracting it from the location of an explosion. So we're just going to be constantly checking to see if I'm near this variable called explosion X and if an explosion is actually active at this moment. So I need an AND statement in here. And so first let's do the distance check. So we need our X position, our current X position, minus the X position of the explosion, which is stored inside a variable called explosion X. And so that'll come up with the distance that these two are away from, these two sprites are away from each other. Now it might end up being a negative number. We don't really care whether it's positive or negative, so we're going to change this to its absolute value, which means strip the negative off of it, so that'll still tell us the distance, basically. So if this distance is less than our threshold, which is 4 squares away or 48 pixels, so I'm going to put less than 48. So if we're within 4 squares of our explosion, and the explosion is active. Remember, the explosion is only active for 1 frame here, otherwise things will be blowing up over and over again. So let's go grab an equal sign. And we're going to grab an explosion active. So if that equals 1, and only for that 1 frame, and we're close enough, then we're going to delete that clone. So let's go to our control blocks and grab a delete this clone. Excellent. Okay, so we can test that out again and test our new zombie code out as well to make sure that zombies are climbing ladders and that creepers are destroying ladders. So let's just gather a whole bunch of stone here while we're waiting for these guys to come up. All right, I'll build my first wall here. Oh, and we'll need to build another one here where our first creeper has shown up. There we go. So these guys are climbing the ladder, falling down the other side. Beautiful. Now, I don't see any zombies coming up here. Okay, this guy's going to blow up. He did, in fact, blow up the wall. Beautiful. And there's still no zombies on this side. That is annoying. Now, we obviously have way too many endermen on the screen here, and we're going to fix that in just a second. All right, so we weren't able to successfully test the zombies climbing the ladder, so let's see if this next scenario comes up any better here. Let's just build this wall here where our first zombie is. So this is perfect. Our zombie's going to get stuck on the wall, but you'll see as soon as the ladder is built, he's going to be able to start climbing again. So here's our zombie. He's stuck. And then our enderman comes and helpfully places a ladder, and yep, there's our zombie climbing the wall, and here comes another zombie who's also going to climb. Beautiful. Okay, so everything's going along swimmingly here. This is just great. Okay, so our next mission here is going to be to fix up our spawning system and tidy up our background music and ambient noises and a couple of those other sort of background functions that are going to be making our game a little more believable. Right now, as we were building this bit by bit, we basically just added a temporary cloning system here where the code just waits a couple of seconds and then creates a new character. We actually want something a little more sophisticated here that's going to make more and more enemies spawn with each new round and add a little bit of randomness to the spawning as well. So we're going to get rid of this temporary stuff and implement a new, much more subtle and complicated system, which I'm going to show you in just a second. So first, let's go to all our enemy sprites. We'll start with our zombie here. And we've got a forever block under the green flag here. We're just waiting and then creating a clone of myself. Let's just trash that. And we're going to do the same thing inside the creeper under the green flag. We've got a forever, and we'll just trash that. And the same for inside the enderman here. We'll trash that as well. Okay, so now that we've completely gutted our enemy spawning system, we're going to have to recreate it. We're going to do that inside a special sprite here called the Game Manager. You should find it in the bottom row right down below here, and you might not see the entire title here. The Game Manager is a blank sprite. There's no costume involved. It just sits there invisibly on the screen, controlling the puppet strings of all our characters. So it's going to be running in the background here, controlling a lot of the game functions, our ambient sounds, our hit point for this house sprite here, and the management of waves that are coming in on the screen here as well. So let's get started with that. So inside the game manager here, let's grab a green flag. And so we're going to give our house hit points. Every time that a zombie successfully penetrates our walls, we're going to lose 1 life, basically. And that is tracked by this variable called house health, which hasn't appeared on the screen here yet. If you've played the finished game, you've probably seen it. So let's actually add that sprite, that variable, because it's not in this version that we're working on right here. So I'll go make a variable. Let's call it house health. And we actually do want that sprite to be visible, or that variable to be visible. I'm going to move it up to the top center of the screen here, where we have it in the final version of our game. All right. So at the beginning, we're going to set that house health variable to 3. That's going to be our hit points. Now we're going to control our bad guys using a wave system now. So we're going to need a new variable that keeps track of what wave number we're in. Let's go make a variable. We'll call it wave. And we're going to set our wave to 1 for right now when we're on the first wave. There we go. We're going to wait 5 seconds at the beginning of the game just to give you some time to start harvesting resources before the bad guys start appearing. And let's put a forever under here, and here's where we're going to start to spawn clones. And as I said, we're going to do something a little more sophisticated. The bad guys appearing are going to be random, and they're going to be kind of based on which wave we're on. So the farther we get into the game, the more and more difficult enemies we're going to be facing. And that all is based off of this wave number that we're doing here. All right, so let's go repeat a certain number of times. And this is where we're going to be spawning, and it's going to be, we're going to repeat the wave number times 2. Let's go grab that and I'll explain it. Wave times 2. So the base number of bad guys we're going to be creating here is 2 in the first level, and then in the second level 4, 6, 8, etc. Right? So every wave there's going to be an extra 2 bad guys appearing on the screen here. So our clone creation is going to happen inside a custom block. Let's go ahead and make that right now. We're going to go to My Blocks, Make a Block, and our new block is going to be called Spawn Random Enemy. There we go. All right, so we have a new custom block that we're going to place right here. And let's go ahead and populate that block here. So first of all, we want the enemies to be spawning differently depending on whether we're at the first level or at the end level. We haven't talked about the end level yet, but if you have a look at your backdrops, we'll see that we have a second backdrop here that represents the end. And you can see the familiar purple colors if you're a Minecraft player, and some of these weird obelisk things that you'll find inside the end level. And so it's the rest of the graphics are fairly similar. You can see that we've mixed up some of the tiles here to reflect the difference in the ground textures and stuff in the end level as well. Okay, so spawn, let's go back to our game manager again. There we go. So we're going to check and see whether we're on the end level here or not. So based on the backdrop number, we're going to spawn enemies differently. So I'm going to go if backdrop number equals 1. And let's go to our looks commands here. And we're going to find a block here that says backdrop number. There it is. If backdrop number is equal to 1, which means we're not yet at the end level, then we're going to be spawning monsters according to this formula. Now again, now we're going to be looking at the wave numbers here. So if our wave, so we need an and in here. So now if our wave number is greater than 2, so as soon as we get to wave 2, things are going to change up here a little bit. So let's go grab a greater than sign in the left side of this and here. And we'll go to our variables, we'll grab a wave number. If wave is greater than 2, and we're going to pick a random number from 1 to 4. So if our wave is greater than 2, then, so on the first wave, we're just going to get zombies, basically. This is the way this code is going to work. And then after that, we're going to have an increasing chance of getting other kinds of mobs in here. So I'm going to grab a pick random and put it inside an equal sign and move it here. I'm going to move all of this down a little bit so this is all out of the way of the adjoining blocks. And maybe shrink this a bit so we can see the whole thing. Sorry, so if wave is greater than 2 and we pick a random number from 1 to 4 and it's equal to 1, then we're going to spawn a creeper or an enderman. Actually, this is an if-else statement. So let's grab an if-else statement here instead. And I'm just going to move the contents of this block into there. There we go. So if we pick that random number 1 to 4, then when we spawn, one of those guys is going to be either an enderman or a creeper, and we're going to decide that inside this if statement. If not, we're going to create a zombie here. So if we roll a 2, 3, or 4 in our 1 to 4, then we're going to create a clone of a zombie here. So let's go create a clone of a zombie. Where's our zombie? Here he is. Okay, but if we do create an exotic monster here, we need to decide whether it's an enderman or a creeper. We only want the enderman to start appearing after wave 4 of the game here. So we're going to do a second if-else statement here and pop it inside this if-else, the if part of the if-else. And here we're going to check the same way we checked here. Actually, I'm going to duplicate this and statement here and all the contents of it because we're going to do something very similar down below. I'm going to right click on the word and duplicate and pop it in there. So now if our wave is greater than 4 and we pick a random number from 1 to 3 and it's equal to 1, so we'll just change that 4 to a 3, then we're going to create a clone of an enderman. And otherwise, we're going to create a clone of a creeper. So the first level of the game, we're going to have nothing but zombies. And then starting on the second level, there'll be a 1 in 4 chance that one of our that each of our guys is going to be a creeper. And then starting on wave 4, when we roll to get an exotic monster, there's going to be a 1 in 3 chance that the exotic monster, instead of being a creeper, is going to be an enderman. And otherwise, we're just going to keep creating zombies. So hope that makes sense. It looks confusing here, but basically it's a system where we're going to see more and more exotic monsters and more mobs on the whole as the game progresses. Okay, so we've figured out which creatures we're spawning. Now we have to go back and control the timing of this. So let's go back to our main green flag code here. So every time we spawn a random enemy here, well, we're doing it every frame right now, which is no good. So we're going to have to put a wait here right after this. And we want the wait time between the new guys being spawned to decrease as the game continues, because of course we're going to have more mobs being created and we need them coming in a more tightly spaced row. Otherwise, each wave is going to get progressively longer, right? So we do want to, we're going to set up a little formula here using a dividing function. So we're going to go wait, go to our control blocks, grab a wait 1 second block and put a dividing division sign in there. So we're going to wait 6 divided by the wave number, wave seconds. And so if you do the math with me here, you'll see in the first wave, we're going to wait 6 seconds before the second guy appears. And when the second wave happens, we're going to wait 3 seconds. 6 over 2 is 3. And in the next wave, 3, we're going to wait 3 over 2, which is 1.5 seconds between each new creature or mob appearing. Okay, great. Now, after we've gone around this loop and created all the new guys, we need to wait for the end of the wave before we start a new wave. We need to give time for us to kill our mobs. And that's a number that should increase based on the number of monsters that we have. The more monsters we have on the screen, we need a little bit more time for you to get rid of these guys. So we're going to add another wait here after we're done this loop. And that is going to be 10 plus the wave number seconds. So let's go wait, and we'll grab a plus sign. So a little bit longer for each wave. So 11 seconds for the first wave, 12 seconds for the second wave, etc. And just a little bit more time to deal with the extra bad guys on the screen before the wave appears. So one last little bit of code we're going to have to add here, which is at the end of all of this, we're going to want to increase the wave number by 1 so that we're set up for wave 2. So let's go change wave by 1. Now, in the final version of the game, this variable is going to be invisible. Your players are not going to be aware of the fact that of which wave it is. They're just going to see more and more monsters spawning on the screen. There's no real need to advertise that number, and it's just going to get in the way and clutter our interface here. So we're going to get rid of that. But for right now, while we're testing, we'll leave that wave variable visible. Let's give the game a little try. And you can see that there's nothing happening right away in the first 5 seconds the way that we want it to. We'll start gathering some gold here. All right, and let's build our first arrow, couple of archers on the rooftop here. And you can see we have 2 enemies. Beautiful. All right, so that's what we were expecting. Now there should be 4 enemies showing up now in wave 2. And let's see what happens. So we have a little bit of a gap in time again because we killed those guys so efficiently. We can do a little more mining if we want to. And let's dispatch these new guys. And so we've got 4 enemies here, as you can see. And through the luck of the draw, none of them ended up being creepers, which is good. We'll wait for us to advance to wave 3 here. I'll gather a little bit more gold while we're waiting. And here comes the next wave of bad guys. And you can see there's even more bad guys now. And here comes our first creeper. So our creepers are starting to spawn. Beautiful. Okay, so now that our spawning seems to be taken care of, let's add some more ambient noises to the game. That's another thing that we'd like to add just to make things a little fancier here. So I'm going to go grab a green flag, and we're going to do a separate bit of code here that's just going to control the background noise. We have a lovely background sound here called concrete halls, and let me play that for you. Starts with a drum roll, and then we get some quiet ambient kind of ominous music going in the background here, and that's just going to be playing during the course of our game here. Sounds suitably ominous. So let's go back to our code, and we're just going to have that keep repeating until our house health is less than 1. So until we're dead, basically. So repeat until house health is less than 1. And the sound we're going to play until done, of course. Otherwise, it's just going to keep restarting that sound. So we'll play sound concrete halls until done. Okay, I'm not going to test that until we get the rest of our ambient sounds going. We also want some cool zombie noises to pop up here every once in a while when a new zombie gets spawned. So let's go over to our zombie sprite here. We're going to add a new block here that's called idle sound, and we're going to have that appear every time, well, not every time, but sometimes when we start a new clone. So I'm back in the when I start as a clone block here under the zombie. Let's just pull this down, grab it by the word show and pull it down to create some space, and we're going to grab an if statement, and we're going to tell it to play that idle sound. So let's go, we're going to create a new custom block here. Let's go to my blocks, and we're going to make a new custom block here called idle sound. Let's pop that block inside the if statement here. So the idle sound is going to generate some random zombie noises, but only every once in a while. If we do it for, if we have every zombie make a sound as they're being created, that'll be fine at the beginning, but later on in the game when we've got 8 or 10 or 12 zombies spawning at a time, there's just going to be way too many zombie noises, and it's just going to be distracting. So we're going to have this sound appear less often as the game continues, because there's more clones. So we'll use kind of a random chance here. Let's go grab a pick random number is equal to. So let's grab an equal to sign and pop it in there. I'll put a pick random on the left side of it. So if a random number from 1 to our wave number, let's go grab waves. So in the first wave, there will be a 100% chance that our zombie will make a groaning sound. And in the second wave, there will be a 1 in 2 chance. And in the third, there will be a 1 in 3 chance. And that there'll still be quite a few. I mean, there'll be, as there'll be more and more zombies, there'll still be quite a few sounds, but this will just stop them from going over the top so that we don't have 20 different zombies all making their spawn noises. So if that's equal to 1. Okay. So now let's reattach the show block here, and then we can deal with the idle sound. So this idle sound block here is just going to determine which idle sound they're playing. Our zombie has 3 idle sounds, just 3 different kinds of groans. Idle, idle 2, and idle 3. So let's just pick a random number. We're going to do that with a temp variable. So let's go set temp to pick random 1 to 3. So instead of a big complicated if-else statement, we're just going to use a temp statement here to pick which of the 3 sounds it's going to make. So let's go grab an if statement. If temp equals 1, let's grab a temp. So if temp equals 1, then we're going to start the first sound. So let's go start sound idle. Let's just duplicate that whole block of code here, and we'll say if it's 2, we'll play idle 2. And we'll duplicate it one more time. And if temp is 3, then we'll play idle 3. Okay, so we've got a nice variety of zombie sounds here that are going to be appearing more or less at random, but quite often during the game. I'm going to hide this wave number now because we don't need it anymore. All right, let's play the game now with our new ambient sounds and see what that's like. It's quite subtle at first, you can see. Let's shoot our first guy. Yeah, and so our guys are kind of making some random snarling noises here when they're spawning. And our music's playing in the background. Beautiful. Let's just wait for some more guys to spawn. And see, the first guy didn't make any noise at all, which is good. The second guy makes noise. Yeah, so you can see we're still getting quite a few zombie noises, but we're not being overwhelmed with it. And the fourth guy here didn't make a noise either. Okay, that's good. This is all working quite nicely. Let's move along then. Okay, so we're ready to code the end portal now, which is going to be waiting somewhere at the bottom of the map here to be discovered. And so in the course of your mining here, at some point you're going to come across the end portal, and you'll have the option to click on the end portal to teleport yourself to the final level. You might not want to do it right away though, because as soon as you click on that, all your existing archers and walls are going to disappear, and you're going to be stuck in a house with no new resources, and you're going to have to start very feverishly gathering resources to defend yourself against this ender dragon, who's just going to completely destroy your house if you haven't built up enough archers by then. So let's get coding that right now. So there is a sprite here called End Portal. It only has one costume, and it is the familiar End Portal that you will recognize from the Minecraft game. It's quite large. Let me show it on the screen here. And as I said, it can appear anywhere along the bottom of the screen here, and we'll code it to appear in a random position. Let's go grab a green flag. And we have a variable called end portal discovered, and I don't think it's in this version that you guys are looking at right now. So let's go ahead and make that variable, just a global variable, end portal discovered. Okay. And we're going to set that to 0 at the beginning of the game, of course, because we haven't found anything. And we're going to make it visible but invisible using this trick that I've used many times. So we're going to have it show, but we're going to set its ghost effect to 99, which will make it collidable. We'll be able to touch it with our mouse, but we won't actually be able to see it with our eyes, because it's, for all intents and purposes, invisible. So we want to switch our background at the beginning of the game to make sure our background is not on the end portal. Remember, we do have a background here that is set up for the end portal. Oh, switch background, not costume. Sorry, switch costume to... So we've got the end dimension here, and then we've got the normal Minecraft background here. So we're going to switch to that Minecraft background to start with. It's called Minecraft Background 2, which doesn't make a lot of sense, and you can change that if you want to. All right, so let's send it to a random location. We'll go to X of a random number. So because of the width of the thing, we don't want to go all the way up to the edge of the screen. So we're going to say minus 203 on the left and 203 on the right. And so even if we place it at the far left of the screen, let me just try that. We'll say go to X, set X to minus 203. You can see that places it on the left side of the screen, pretty close to the edge. And if we're at positive 203, it's basically there as well, so that it fits on the screen perfectly. So we're going to have it go somewhere between those two extremes every time that's created, always at the bottom level, right against the bedrock. The Y coordinate is going to be minus 144, so a little bit higher than that. So let's just pick some random numbers here and see some of the places that our end portal could arrive at. There we go. And so it's high enough up that you can see it even against those variables at the bottom. All right, so far so good. Now we're just going to sit here and wait until the portal's discovered. So let's go grab a wait until under our control blocks. Wait until end portal discovered equals 1. And then we're going to have it fade in slowly. So we're going to have it fade in like 3% of the time. Let's go repeat 33 times. And each time we're going to change the ghost effect, change color effect, and change that to change ghost effect by -3. So when it's discovered, we'll slowly have it fade in and make sure it's at the front layer here. Now, how will this end portal discovered change to 1? We're going to do that over inside another block, but while we're here, let's just finish up the rest of this code here. So now we're going to basically have it stay at the front here until we click on it. So we're going to make sure that nothing else appears in front of it, no other blocks, like we can't mine on this area here. So we'll make sure it's in the front so we'll know that we can't mine it. So let's go grab a repeat until. Repeat until, and we'll grab an and. So we basically want to be clicking on it here. So we're gonna check to see that that we're touching the mouse pointer and we're clicking, which is mouse down ? So when we click on this sprite, so until we do that, we're gonna just keep moving it to the front. Go to front layer. And then when we do click on it, we're going to switch our backdrop to the end. Minecraft background, the end. We're going to broadcast a message. So let's go to our broadcasts. And the message is traveled to the end. That's going to send a message to the rest of our sprites, which do care whether they whether we're at the end or not. And I'll show you what to do with those guys in a second. And then hide. Okay, so that's all the code we need inside our end portal. Now we have to go elsewhere to finish this up. So the first thing we're going to want to do is go over to our underground blocks here. Our underground block, which is the very first sprite that we played with way back in episode 1. So we're going to go check to the check if positioned mined here. And at the very bottom of this, after we're basically using this little block of code here to determine whether we're putting what kind of blocks are appearing next to us when we mine out a new block, what's going to be appearing there. And so right here at the bottom of this block, we're going to add an if statement that's going to be checking to see if we're touching the end portal. So if touching end portal, that's where we're going to flip that variable over to 1. So let's go set end portal discovered to 1. And the last thing we want to do here is delete, if we're touching the end portal, is delete whatever clones we're going to put down here, because we don't need any other textures down here. So we're going to just go to our control blocks and grab a delete this clone and put it inside the if statement. All right, so now we're ready to test out our code here and watch our end portal appear. So let's go click the green flag. Our house health isn't completely implemented yet, so we don't really have to worry about that very much. I'm just going to dig right down to the bottom and see if I can unearth this end portal, and I'm not going to worry too much about monsters right now. There it is, and it happened to turn up right below us. And then when I click on it, there we go, now we're in the end dimension. But you can see we still have all our stuff and all our monsters on the screen. So the next step here is we're going to have to delete all of the monsters and all of the stuff that we've built here. And that's all going to happen when we receive this event, which is traveled to the end. Okay, so let's get started with that. Okay, so let's go over to the zombie sprite and we'll start with him. So when the zombie receives a message that says traveled to the end, we're just going to delete this clone. That will get rid of all the zombies. We're going to do the same thing to the creepers and the endermen. So I'm just going to drag this block of code over to those two guys. There we go. And our archers need a slightly different approach here. So let's go over to our archers. And when they receive a travel to the end, we still want to delete the clone, but before we do that, we want to delete that list that's called archer indexes. Remember, this keeps track of all the archers on the screen, and the archer bows refer to that when they're being created. And every time an archer gets deleted from this list, and the bow also disappears from that list. And that's why we're also going to have to delete all of our archer indexes before we go ahead and delete this clone. Okay. You guys will remember that when I receive works just like a when I start as a clone. So these messages always apply to clones as well as to the master object as well. So of course you can't delete the master object, so the delete this clone will only work on that. Okay, so that's good for the archers. The ladders have to disappear too, and that is just a delete this clone. I'm just going to drag this over to the ladders, and I'll remove that one block. There's my ladder sprite. So I'm just going to remove the delete all of archer indexes. Okay, so my ladders are gone. My walls now, let's go over to our wall blocks, which are right over here. And I'm trying to remember whether there's anything special about the wall blocks here. It might just be the same block all over again. Whoops, so let me go look over here at my reference version. Yeah, I think that's just going to be when I receive message. So let me just drag that over from one of the other sprites. We'll just go over to the zombie sprite, and I'll drag that over to the wall block. Okay, there we go. So now all our walls will disappear as well. And I'm thinking that's it. I might remember something else in a minute, but I think that's everything that we have to reset. Now there's one more thing we have to do over inside our main mining block here, the underground blocks. Let's get back to that again. So we're going to kind of reset our underground digging at this point when we get to the end level, right? So we're going to have to duplicate a whole bunch of the stuff that we did back at the initial part of the game. Remember, we had the beginning part of our mine set up here with this code here. And we had this blocks X and blocks Y list here that kept track of what we'd mined and what we haven't. So all of this stuff is going to have to be redone. Now I don't want to just rewrite all this code. So what we're going to do is actually create a custom block here that's called start event. And we're just going to call that right after we get to the hide block here. I'm going to drag this loose here and put that all into a new custom block that's called start event, or you could call it start game, or start round, I guess would be better. Anyway, we're just going to call this start event. I'm going to call that here, and then I'm going to attach this here. And so that will just reset all of the mining that we did on the first level and set it up so that we're ready to go again on the next level. Okay, so the next little thing I want to tackle here is our ability to get hurt by the bad guys. Right now they're just kind of trampling over our base and then heading off in the opposite direction. So we do want the ability to get hurt and eventually killed once our house health diminishes to 0. So we're going to add that inside all 3 of our mobs at this point. We are going to need a sound effect that I haven't given you. So if you're still working on this file from the beginning, you're not going to have the appropriate sound effect, which is player hit. You may or may not, depending on when you pick this up. So I'm going to go ahead and update the starter file and all of the catch-up files for this project to make sure that this player hit sound is there. But if you started coding this right at the beginning when we were putting this together, you might be missing this sound effect file. So if you are, go and grab the sound effect from a starter file or a catch-up file that you can find in the links down below, and just take that sound from one of the sprites in the starter file, drag it into your library, and then it will be available to you, so you can drag it back out into your sounds tab for all three of your bad guys. So your zombie, let me do that for the creeper right now. We don't have a player hit in there, so I'm just going to drag it in like that. And we'll do the same thing for our enderman as well. Player hit. Okay, so now I have a sound effect that I can play for all three of these sprites when they penetrate our base. Okay, so the code's going to be the same for all three of these guys. I'm going to show it to you once, and then we're just going to do a quick duplicate to copy it over. The code always goes in the same place here. So when I start as a clone, this is the main AI for each particular mob. Down at the bottom here, you'll see if health points are less than 1, then die. So that means the mob dies. But right down below that is where we're going to add an if statement that checks to see our house hit points, and it's going to check and see whether our zombies have penetrated the house and then take our hit points down. So let's go add another if statement there. So right underneath the other if statement, and we're going to check and see our X position of our mob. So we're doing and we'll do X position is less than and X position is greater than. We're going to see whether it's between two different values, and it's so the X position. Let's grab two X positions, one here and one here, and so for X position is less than 31 or greater than minus 31, that will mean that our mob is within the boundaries of our house here and will take damage. So let's put these into the and statement. If either of those happen, then if we're still alive, if we're dead, there's no use subtracting our hit points, so if we're down to 0. So we're going to add another if statement inside here that's checking to see if we're still alive. So if house health is greater than 0, grab house health. So if we're still alive, then we're going to change our house health by -1. And then we are going to play that player hit sound that I've just added. Once again, if you're looking for that sound, you can find it in the starter file or in any of the catch-up files, and just use your library to drag it in. Okay, so either way, whether we're alive or dead, we still want that monster to disappear, the one that's in our house here. So we're going to do a little loop here, repeat 31 times. I'm not quite sure about the math here. And we're going to change our ghost effect. I think we're just going to go 33 times here. And we'll change our ghost effect by 3 here. By 3. There we go. And that will bring us up to full invisibility. And then once we fade it away, we can delete that clone. So that's inside of this loop here. There we go. Okay, so that will get rid of our bad guy. Now I need all of this code here, everything from the initial if statement. I'm just going to drag it over to my creeper. And I'm also going to drag it over to my enderman. Okay, so over here in my creeper, I've got my new code that I've dragged over. I'm going to look for that when I started the clone block, which is right here. You can see the die part at the end here to confirm you're in the right place. So right below that if statement, we'll drop this. Let's go to the enderman and we'll do the same thing. Grab our code, and plunk it in underneath the if statement. There we go. I want to clean up this code a little bit. Okay. So that should be working. Let's just give it a quick test here and see if our hit points are dropping. When these guys get into our house, we'll just wait for the first guy to appear. Here they come. I'm going to go looking for the end portal while I wait. See where it is this time. There it is. It's appeared. So I'm not going to click on it here until we take some damage. So I'm also going to check and see if these guys are disappearing properly or not. They're their first guy. He's come into our house. Oh, there we go. And I've taken 1 damage. And there's another guy. Beautiful. Oh, and there's my damage. Now I'm going to click on the end portal and see if these guys disappear. There we go. Beautiful. Okay. Everything's working nicely here. Okay, so it looks like we're running way over time here. I'm going to blast through the last little bit of coding here. Most of it's pretty straightforward. I'm just going to explain it as we go along. And if you'd like to code along with me, you can freeze frame on this code and build it with me. I'm just going to try and keep the length of this video down not too far over 1 hour, which is I normally set as my limit here. Okay, so we're in the game manager, and there's one last little bit of code we have to add here that sets the volume of the background music to 15%. It's quite a loud file here. And this is where we're gonna make use of this house health variable. So once it does actually reach 0 or get below 1, we're gonna basically have this code pause and wait for that to happen. When it does, it's gonna stop all the other scripts in this sprite. And what that does is make sure that no new bad guys are being spawned at the end of this. So once we stop all the other scripts, all the code over here that does creation of zombies and endermen, etc., is all gonna freeze up. And then we're just going to fade away the rest of the volume until we get down to 0, basically. So that's just controlling the music volume, and you can enter that code right now if you want. Now let's go over to the title sprite. Now the version of the title sprite you have was probably going to be this older version, which is just the word Minecraft. We modified this a little later in the production cycle here and then created it, turned it into something that was a little more suitable for the tower defense version of this game, Minecraft TD. And you can see how it fits quite nicely above the house here, and it doesn't cover up any of the interface elements. So if this is not part of your file, again, you can backpack it in. If you want to use this version of it, you can find it inside the starter file or any of the catch-up files up until this point. So if you don't have it, just load up an older version of the game that's saved, and you'll be able to backpack it in from there. Let's have a look at the code on the title screen here. So when green flag clicked, we're going to send it to a certain location on the screen. We're going to, and by the way, if you find that you don't see, if you're going with this version of the graphic, you might have to move it down a little bit. When I first called up this graphic, I found that when I would put it on the screen, it was looking like this. And no matter what I did, I couldn't get it visible. It's because it was too high. So you'll want to move it down a little bit. If it's appearing invisible for whatever reason, just rearrange it on your screen here just to make it, to align it to something that looks good. All right, so we're going to place it at this position here. We're going to hide all our variables just for in the beginning while we're showing off our game. We're going to set our ghost effect to 0 so that the thing is completely visible. Then we're going to make sure it's at the front, in front of all the other graphics. And we're going to leave that on the screen for 5 seconds. You remember at the beginning of the screen, we can do some digging, but the monsters don't actually show up until after that. So as soon as this fades away, you'll start to hear groaning sounds and your monsters will start to appear. And so this is going to fade away with a change ghost effect by 3. That's going to repeat 34 times, so that will take it up to 100% ghost, which will disappear this Minecraft logo. I'm going to suggest, though, that you use the Minecraft TD logo anyway, which I think just looks a lot sharper. Then our variables are going to become visible again, the 3 variables that are visible on the screen here. Now there's a wait until, and the script's just going to wait here until we kill off the Ender Dragon. So as I said, I'm going to get to the Ender Dragon next week and teach you all the details. But the wait until here is waiting for the Ender Dragon's health to get down to 1. We have a second variable here, which I'm going to explain next week, called Ender Dragon Charge Start Health. And that has to do with the fact that the Ender Dragon is kind of swooping across onto the screen, and we don't necessarily want him to die right away. So we're going to give him a chance to plunge to his death before the game actually ends here. And I'll explain this in more detail next week. Then after the dragon's dead, we wait 3 seconds, and then we reflash this title on the screen and slowly fade it away until it, hold it, that's fading to 0. Actually, we're fading it in again, and that will be there while we roll our credits or put a you win screen or whatever, however it is you want to end your version of the game here. You'll see that our finished version of the game has some credits rolling at the end of this. You don't have to include those credits though. And though I'd love to have a shout out if you are going to be making a copy of this game. A lot of the people who made the Among Us game ended up getting lots and lots of views on it, and so I just want to make sure that if you're making this game that you at least give Chromeworks a credit somewhere along the line if you're following this tutorial. All right, so let's go over to this other sprite here called Minecraft You Died. I'll just show you the costume. It's basically a copied over You Died screen from the original game. You see that it's a little bit transparent, which will let the game continue running behind the red background, which is the way that Minecraft does it as well. And so when green flag clicked, we're going to hide, we're going to set volume to 50% and tell this to go to the middle. So the 50% applies to this sound effect that we're going to be playing, which is called C418, which is just some nice Minecraft music that we're just going to play at the end after we die. And it really does look a lot like a You Died screen from the original game. Though these buttons won't be interactive, you won't actually be able to respawn or get to the title screen from here. All right, so we're going to hide our variables. We're going to show this graphic, and it's basically going to fade in quickly. So it's going to be set to a ghost effect of 100 right away as soon as it becomes visible, and then it's going to fade in quite quickly. It's just going to take 5 frames to fade in. We're just going to change the ghost effect by -20, and that's what's going to appear on the screen in front of everything else. You've also got this Minecraft background that's going to be showing during the credits, and mostly, yeah, during the end credits of the game. And that's just a Minecraft dirt texture here, similar to the one that you'll see in the game. And let's have a look at the code in that. So again, we're waiting for, so we're hiding it at the beginning. Again, we're setting the volume of our music to 50%. We're centering it, making it invisible, waiting 1 second. And then we're gonna, that 1 second is enough time for Ender Dragon health stats to be buffed up so that we don't die right away by accident. And again, we're checking to see if the Ender Dragon's dead yet. And then we're waiting 3 seconds, and we're gonna hide our variables. So this is the winning condition, right? That this screen's gonna show. And so this is if the Ender Dragon is dead. Then we're going to play the credit song. We're going to make sure this graphic goes to the front and becomes visible. It's going to fade in, and the other graphics are going to show in front of it. The Minecraft Tower Defense logo is going to show in front of it, and then your game will be over. All right, so we can't test all of this right now because the Ender Dragon isn't enabled yet, but I can basically show you what happens when we run out of health here. Let's click the green flag. So I've just attached a little script to the X button here that will, okay, so you can see the beginning part there. Let's show that again. So we've got the really nice Minecraft TD logo up here. And then after 5 seconds, it fades away, and then our variables appear. I'm just going to hit, so as I said, I've mapped out player damage to the button X. So I'm going to hit X here to do some damage to our house so we don't have to wait for the zombies to collide. And when that third one happens, we get our "You Died" showing up, our music changes, and we get something that looks a lot like what happens when you die in Minecraft, where you can still see the action happening behind you, but you're basically the game's basically over at this point. All right, let's stop that. So sorry I had to rush through the end of that. I just felt like we were just spending too much time. This is all very basic stuff that I didn't have to build block by block anyway. So next week we're going to tackle the Ender Dragon. As I said, there's some very complex math in here, some of which I'm just going to have to give to you again. There's some stuff to do with the elliptical movement of this dragon as he swoops around the screen, and there's some fairly complex code in there. So we're going to do one more, probably a little bit shorter session next week to finish off the Ender Dragon, and then our game will be done. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to comment down below, or you can drop me an email at info@chromeworks.ca, and I'll be happy to help you with anything you want to know about this game or any thoughts you have about it. I'm very happy to hear feedback. So I will be back next week with part 6, the final chapter of Minecraft Tower Defense. Thanks for joining me, guys. Bye now.